All right, so let me explain the question here. This trader wants to block all trade signals when the closing price of the bar is inside of the first standard deviation lines of the VWAP, right? So this could apply to the Keltner channel. This could apply to the Bollinger Band, per se. You could tighten up your Bollinger Band, tighten up your Keltner channels. And that's also what's done here in this particular case is the first standard deviation VWAP lines here are set to 0.5. So they're actually half a standard deviation. And so whenever price is within the first standard deviation lines here, to block all signals. And we can see the screenshot that he sent in actually is the opposite of what he wants. So when the closing price is inside the bands, we can see he's getting a long and a short output, which that actually allows trade signals. So we actually want the opposite of this. Right? So we'll build this here the right way. So he's very close. I think he's very close, except if this was inverted, you would get the blocking here that you wanted, right? So the long and the short output together would have 0 output. But the problem is, we can see when the bars are below the lower standard deviation, he does have a short output, but if you invert this, then what happens is the short output goes away and you get a long output, right? And most likely, I'm guessing that if price is below the lower standard deviation, he probably only wants short trades. He wants to filter short signals only, right? So this, if we inverted this, it would produce long signals only, right? Because remember, the short output goes away when you invert it. So yeah, so we'll kind of build this the right way here. All right, so I have the VWAP here, and we can see the shading here a little bit. Let me shade that a little bit better. There. All right, yeah, so whenever the closing price is inside the bands here, inside the shaded area, we want to block signals. So let's make a new logic template here. Let's see here. Okay, so we're going to need a series of comparison solvers here. And, well, actually, no. Initially, we're only going to need one comparison solver here. Okay, so we're going to be comparing the closing price of the bar, all right, to the, in this case, the VWAP, to the standard deviation, all right, upper line, and the standard deviation 1 lower line. There. All right, so input A, that is going to be the closing price of the bar, and input B will be the VWAP. So let's get the VWAP here. All right, there you go. So I'm using NinjaTrader's order flow VWAP. And remember, that's, well, yeah. So I'm still using a multiplier here of 1, although the question was asked about, using up a 0.5 standard deviation offset there. So again, right, so you can obviously go in, and adjust your standard deviation multipliers as you see fit. I'm just going to use the default indicator settings here. And so now, let's see, let's produce a, let's see, how should we do this? Yeah, a short output using the upper line. So in other words, if the closing price if the closing price is below the upper line, we're going to produce a short. And if the closing price here is above the lower line, if it's above it, we'll produce a long. So I'm using the upper line to produce a short output, using the lower line to produce a long output. And let me make sure the rules are correct. Yeah. Actually, I can just tell by looking at the output here. Right? So if we look at this, there, right, we can see the closing price of these bars are all inside the first standard deviation line there. Right? And we're getting a long and a short output at the same time, right? So, yeah, so we actually want to eliminate this. And let's see. Oh, you know what? I built exactly what what the customer built. So yeah, I can see why he built it that way, right? Yeah, this is the normal way. Yeah, this is kind of the normal way of how you would usually approach something like this here. But I think, oops, there we go. So what I did is I inverted it and I swapped it. So remember when I was explaining the screenshot that was sent in, you know, I said if we can invert it, and when we invert it here, right, there we go. So when we inverted it, right, now there's no signal. So there's no output, which means no signals, right, will occur inside the bands here. And of course, remember, this is a filter, right? That's a filter mechanism. So you're going to have an AND node in there, right? And of course, the rest of your trade signal, right, is all going to be connected into an AND node somewhere. And so this is just a filtering mechanism here. So, right. So I guess, you know, if you're doing counter trend signals here, then you will want long signals when price is below the lower standard deviation. But if you only want to take shorts, if you're trying to go with the trend, right, then you're only wanting to allow short signals to occur. And so with this, we can now swap it. And there we go, we swapped it. So we inverted this and we swapped this to get this to work. So actually, I'm going to see if I can set this up without without using the invert and the swap here. So yeah, I kind of went with my default way of thinking here. So I'm going to reverse the long and the short plots here that we're using. And yeah, there we go. All right. I knew it was easy. Sometimes, you know, remember guys, the beauty of BloodHound is you can experiment and test and get the results you want. You know, so don't expect yourself to be able to set these solvers up right the very first time. You know, even I sometimes will take a couple of shots at setting the solvers up until I get the results that I'm looking for. All right, so don't put too much pressure on yourself here. That is what makes BloodHound so powerful. Is, you know, you can be like, oh, that didn't work out. Let me kind of reverse some things around here. So yeah, so I just had to reverse the plot selection here. I thought I was going to have to go into the comparison rules and reverse things as well, but apparently not. But if I do reverse these here, and let's see. No, that took me back to where I was. Yeah. So, in any case, yeah, just use, the default conditions here, and everything's good. Yeah. And so, yeah, ideally, this is really what you want here, right? You want a short output when price is below the lower bands, right, along what's above. But if you are building a counter trend system there, as I said, once you get this set up right correctly, then we can just use the swap button there and reverse those outputs. And there we go. So in my opinion, this is a better way to set it up versus using the invert and the swap at the same time. So, all right. So again, just to go through these, right, we're comparing the closing price, and we want a short output when the close is below the lower standard deviation, and a long output when it's above the upper standard deviation. Okay. And we're just using the default conditions here. Well, actually, I switched it to use equals. So I did include the equals, but the long is the default condition here for a long output is greater than, and the default condition for a short is the less than. So there. Let's see, and oh yeah, let me do one more. So this is comparing the closing price. So let's make a copy of this. So what if you want the entire bar, right? So the entire bar has to be outside the standard deviation band, right? And there we go, paste. All right. Okay, so this time we want the entire bar outside. Right, so that should be just a matter of changing the prices that we're looking at for input A. So for a short, we now want the low to be less than the lower band, right? So now, I'm sorry, the high. So now we need the high of the bar to be below the lower band, right? And that tells us the entire bar is outside. So for a short output, we're going to use the high price. And then for a long output, we're going to use the inverse price. So we'll set this to the low, like so. And there we have it, right? So now we can see these bars here that are touching the band don't have an output, right? So the bar has to be completely above the band or completely below the band now, right? And so it's just a matter of, changing what bar price we're looking at. And also, yeah, if you want the entire bar to be outside, then you probably do not want to include the equals, right? So you probably want to get rid of the equals condition, like so, right? Because technically, if that wick equals the band, then it's touching. Yeah, so again, personal decision there, right? So, but there we go. So here's one where just the closing price of the bar has to be outside the inner band, And this one, the entire bar has to be outside the inner band. So, yeah. And just for good measure, there. Yeah. So again, both of these are filters, so these filters will be connected to an AND node somewhere within the rest of your logic there, the rest of your signal. Yeah, correct. Yeah. Manny's just pointing out that, whether it's counter trend or mean reversion trades, that would be correct. Mean reversion would be typically the correct terminology here, or the way of looking at it for the VWAP line for sure. Yep. Well, all right, that does it for that question.